Okay, Jim Feist and Victor King. Victor, you're down in Florida. We're both having, I'm sure, good weather unless you have a storm or something. Yesterday, we had some kind of storm here in Vegas, but I was in Los Angeles and we got on the plane to come back and we had a 2 hour ground stop that prevented us from leaving LA because Vegas was shut down.
That is something that I have not heard, Jim. That is very, very surprising there. Something in regards to the Vegas airport, or what was the reason?
There was a big storm that came through here, a lot of wind and rain,
Hmm.
and they just stopped all the planes from coming in.
Wow.
So that was
Interesting.
it, very interesting and very unusual.
Yeah.
So how are you?
Good. Much better after week 2 of the NFL than in week 1. We had a really nice weekend in regards to our totals. The totals tip sheet newsletter ended up going 4-1 last week. We did hit our two big best bets there, as you can see. Panthers and the Cardinals game over the total. The Giants Cowboys game over the total. That was a fun one to watch. Tuco, of course, went 2-0 with his team totals last week. He did a very good job. Of course, the one that we mentioned on the podcast was the Baltimore Ravens over their team total. I think we had the score 29 or more against Cleveland. You saw the final. Baltimore had 41 points in that game. Very interesting considering they only had 242 offensive yards, but they ended up getting the points. A nice week again for the tip sheet at 4-1. What wasn't in the tip sheet was our King Creole 4-star over of the week in the NFL. That one was a winner as well, and that was in the Lions Bears game. You saw the final score of that one, 52 points or something like that for the Lions. We were on the over. It's our over of the week in that game. It cashed very early in the third quarter, so a very good week overall in regards to our King Creole service, our NFL over unders, and compared to week 1 in the NFL, week 2 was extremely different from an over under standpoint. And before we get into some of our props and our free plays, we should probably run through last week's results in the NFL from an over under perspective, Jim, because it again, as I mentioned, it was pretty much a complete contrast than what
Totally,
you saw in week 1. I would
totally.
even call it like a totals reversal. If you remember last week, we talked about the Sunday daytime games in the NFL. There were 12 of those games, only one over, 11 unders, only 36.4 points per game. Last week in the NFL, those same Sunday daytime games, again, did a complete flip flop. 10 of them went over, two went under. A lot of scoring, 54.7 points per game. That's an incredible increase of 18.3 points per game comparing the week 2 numbers to the week 1 numbers. And I don't know about you, but on NFL Sundays, I'm primarily watching the Red Zone channel, NFL Network slash
That's,
ESPN.
I do the same. Yes.
I absolutely love the Red Zone channel. When people are and teams are scoring, the Red Zone channel cannot be beat. Red Zone channel week 1 in the NFL, it actually put me to sleep with the lack of scoring. But last week was a fantastic week for the Red Zone channel again, because particularly the Sunday daytime games averaged almost 21 points per game more than week 1. Plenty of
Oh,
scoring, a lot of fourth quarter scoring, a lot of touchdowns. I think Scott Hansen from the NFL Network said that the 12 early games had 75 total touchdowns. That's a lot of touchdowns. That's about 6.25 touchdowns per game average in the NFL last week. So, again, particularly Sunday afternoon, exploded in terms of points. The overall results from last week 10 overs, 6 unders, 63% over the total. I mentioned the contrast. Here's another weird kind of contrast if you remember week one in the NFL, the four primetime games, the night games, that was the only high scoring aspect of week one. Three out of the four primetime
Right.
games went over in week one. In week two, last week, all four of the primetime games under the total. So again, it was also a complete contrast in the night games. 3-1 to the over in week one, 0-4 to the under in week two. One thing that this teaches us, if this is a teaching moment in the NFL for us bettors, for us gamblers, for us handicappers, it's this, Jim. Don't base this week's over under bets on what happened last week. Because if you did that in week two, you took a bath, your bankroll took a bath
Absolutely.
because you probably bet more unders than overs because of what happened in week one, and you had a very, very bad week. So, again, this is our lesson. We can never knee jerk. We can never knee jerk off what happened exactly the previous week because chances are you'll have a week in the NFL that is completely different, completely opposite. This is why you got to have some sort of a accurate historical database
Well,
so you
let
can
me,
take a look at some of those numbers.
let me ask you, Victor, is that representative of many future, if not future, but past years where the week one reverses so much to week two?
You do see reversals, big time contrast changes from week to week in the NFL, where you get an outstanding high scoring week. All of a sudden, the next week is going to be low scoring, and vice versa, a low scoring week to a high scoring week. A lot of time that's because of the built in value in the over under line. Last week's lines were a little bit lower than last season's week two over underlines, again, because of what happened in week one, increasing the value on the overs last week. So you do see that a lot. You do see a lot of contrasting results from week one to week two and from any week to week pattern in the NFL. We will say this now. We're at, let's see, 10 overs, six unders again last week. The average points per game, 49.8. Compare that to 41.3 in week one. So the average game last week is about 8 points higher than week one. And we'll say this in each of the last 2 years, week three, this upcoming week, have actually been pretty low scoring. Last year, week three games went 6-10 over under. The year before that, 5-11. So in the last two seasons, week three games have gone 11 overs, 21 unders. Is that a signal that we may see a few more unders than overs this week? Perhaps it is.
Let me ask
Again,
you
we'll
this.
see what happens. That's for
Let
sure.
me ask you this question then. Do the Okay, we'll forget about what the lines were going into the games. We look at the performance of these offenses to be able to produce so many more points because they didn't go over by a little bit. They went over by a lot last week.
Right.
And and is that because the offenses don't practice very much? They don't play many of the starters in the preseason, so there really is no real preseason. So week one is kind of like a preseason, and week two is like the first real game
Yep.
because now they've had some, and that's why you see the jump.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%. And then, as you know, the big schedule change in the NFL occurred just after the 2020 season. That's when we reduced the preseason from 4 games to three. That's when we added a bye week in between the preseason and the regular season. And of course, we increased the regular season schedule from 16 to 17 games. So the big schedule change happened after the 2020 season. And as you mentioned, particularly with that added bye week now before the regular season starts, it obviously takes a week for teams to regain some of their offensive chops from the previous year. So I would agree with that 100% that the combination of the extra bye week and this new schedule has produced fairly low scoring week one results. and it does take us getting into week 2 or week 3 before we finally started to see some offense that we like seeing in pro football.
So we would see the bookmakers, odds makers, let's specifically, now say, oh, good, look at all those points last week. Now we're going to increase the lines a little bit. And maybe the defenses now start to see what these offenses are capable of and they make some adjustments. So that's why week 3 would drop back a little bit.
It would, although we will say this, the average over under line last week, let me get this correct here, was 44.4. As of this morning, the average line for this week's games is at 45.4. So, based on last week's results, we're seeing an average NFL line that's a point higher already here in week 3 than we saw last week in week 2. So, the odds makers have already over adjusted ever so slightly a point per game based on that very high scoring week last week.
Is that enough to make the difference that you were alluding to, that maybe we would go back under a little bit this week?
It does, although we'll say this. Um, Division games during this week of the season tend to be higher scoring than not. I've got this nice little pattern that we found in our newsletter. Week 3 division games do trend over. It's 19-3 now to the over. We're dating back 12 seasons. Week 3 division games in which the home team is favored and the over under line is over 40 points. There are actually one, two, three, four of those games this week in the NFL that qualify in this higher than anticipating scoring situation. One of those happened last night, and that was the Miami Buffalo game. It did end up going over the total, despite the fact that neither team had fantastic yardage totals. The game still ended up going over the total. Buffalo was one of those week 3 home favorites, over under 40 or higher. The game ended up going over the total. So if you're looking for potential overs this week, I would take a look at the divisional games in which the home team is favored, like Jacksonville at home favored over Houston, LA Chargers at home favored over Denver, San Francisco at home favored over Arizona, knowing that Buffalo Miami over already cashed last night. These are some potential good over spots for this particular week. I can't speak about the non-division games, but some of the divisional games have been higher scoring in this week when the home team is favored.
Are there any teams in the NFL that have developed a little bit of, I know it's a short sample size, any teams in the NFL that have gone 2-0 one way or the other, over or under?
I can check that out for you right now. In fact, I happen to have the database open. Let me see here. 2-0. Right off the bat, we know that the one of the teams in which their over/under results have been very, very surprising, Indianapolis Colts. They're one of the couple 2-0 over teams on the season. Falcons are 0-2 to the under. Baltimore is 2-0 to the over. That's the Ravens. The Chicago Bears are a surprising 2-0 to the over. What else do I have here? I've got a couple of unders here. The Packers, with their fantastic defense, 0-2 to the under. As is Houston. We mentioned Houston in the beginning of the season as one of our favorite under teams with a struggling offense, a bad offensive line, and a very, very good defense. It's no surprise seeing Houston at 0-2 over under. I believe that's it. It looks like a team we're about to talk about, and this is a very good segue, that is on a very surprising 2-0 over under run. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
something's wrong there. And while I'm on the subject, let me throw this out because this is the free play we're going to be using this particular week. And it's a game that in past seasons, I probably would never bet this game over the total, but the timing is right this year. And it's the Pittsburgh Steelers, New England Patriots. We're right around 44 and a half points. And again, Jim, man, oh man, how things change in the NFL. As I mentioned, I would pretty much never touch a Pittsburgh or New England over back in previous seasons, but there's something seriously wrong here, not just with the Pittsburgh defense, but with the New England defense as well. A Pittsburgh defense that I might add, I just got this interesting tweet. The Steelers have the most expensive defense in the NFL by $25 million,
Wow.
and they are struggling. They've allowed 32 and 31 points in their first two games, along with 400 and 395 yards, and against two below average offenses to boot in the Jets and the Seahawks. Not only that, but even dating back, we were starting to see signs of the Pittsburgh defensive decline last season. They've allowed 27 or more points in 7 of their last 8 road games, the Pittsburgh
Oh,
Steelers.
wow.
So these are surprising numbers. On the flip side, the host Patriots, they've allowed big yardage totals against Las Vegas. If you remember in game one, Geno Smith had a career day passing against New England. And even Miami had a good offensive game last week against New England as well. Not only that, but New England is on a surprising 10-3-1 over-under run in their last 14 games, dating back to October of last season. They were tied, actually, another surprising fact, last year as the best home over team in the NFL. So I think we've got sneaky shootout potential in this Steelers-Patriots game. The Steelers have a weird schedule because in the next 2 weeks after this week, they play not one, but 2 international games in a row. One of these rare things is I think it's only happened once before now, maybe twice, where Jacksonville has played 2 international games in a row. But beginning next week, the Steelers, they got a game. I think is it the Dublin, Ireland game? It may be. But they have 2 international games in a row coming up, Pittsburgh Steelers. And there was a very interesting pattern last year as NFL teams, the week before any neutral site international game, went 7 overs, only 1 under, average of 50.4 combined points per game. That's the situation for Pittsburgh. You also have the fact that win for the Patriots last week was a fairly high-scoring nature down here in South Florida. They
Sure
beat
was.
our Dolphins 33-27. That type of win puts them in very good over-the-total territory. We've got an 11-1 since 17 from the database. Home teams who scored 30 or more points on the road and then 14 or less points at home in their last 2 games. That applies to the New England Patriots. So with all said and done, with defensive difficulties, with the fact you got a little bit of a weird look ahead that results in a high-scoring game, I'm not surprised that the over-under line of this game is a couple of points higher than you would normally see in a New England-Pittsburgh game. Normally, you'd see a line of 40, maybe 41 in a Pittsburgh-New England game. We're up to 44.5. I think that line is justified, and this is one of those sneaky shootout potentials. So, Jim, we're going to use this as our free play of the week. Steelers, Patriots over the total, a game that should be a lot higher scoring than people anticipate. And the odds makers have already caught on to this too.
Yeah, I haven't seen any movement on the game except from the opener. It just sits there. 44 and a half. That's it everywhere.
Pretty rock solid there. If you can find a 44, that is the optimum line because 44 and 45 are both fairly key numbers when it comes to NFL totals. We
Correct.
can accept 44 and a half. That'll work for me. I may consider buying it down a half to 44. But either way, it could be pretty high scoring game there in New England in the Sunday early kickoffs.
Well, especially if you can find a 44.5 minus 15, or 18 is one here I see right now at 18. So it's a little cheaper to buy it down to 44.
Right. Yep. So it's a non-conference game. It's going to be higher scoring than people think. That's for sure. Of course, we've got one, two, three. We've got four other plays in this week's newsletter, and it is available. Where it is? Here we go. Totals tip sheet available at playbooksports.com. Of course, we mentioned revenge of the overs last week, particularly the Sunday afternoon games that were really, really high scoring. And while I got this week's tip sheet, let's not forget our playbook newsletter, 18 pages, jam packed. Mark and the guys have been working on it. We released it on Wednesday evening. This week's playbook newsletter, you don't want to miss it. In addition to the playbook, in addition to the totals tip sheet, we even do a third newsletter that just debuted last night, and that's our playbook midweek alert newsletter for the guy who is into a lot of numbers, a lot of stats. It's presented like in a racing form type situation, and that's our midweek alert. So, heck, man, for the next 18 or 19 weeks, it'll be 3 newsletters a week for the team down here in South Florida at Playbook, and we're looking forward to another big weekend.
The midweek doesn't come out the first couple of weeks, right? It comes out like starting the third week.
Right, starting the third week of the NFL season is when the midweek debuts. That way, we've got a couple of weeks of NFL data that we can go over and peruse, and we've already got about 3 or 4 weeks of college football data as well. So yes, issue number 1 just came out last night.
Other than totals, but in the actual sides games, is there a specific? I mean, a lot of people target yards per point, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any key stat that you feel is a little bit more important than some other stat?
When I handicap totals, a lot of people poo-poo the quarterback yards per passing attempt. I don't. I think it's very, very valuable when you see a quarterback that is throwing for 9 or more yards per attempt. He's airing it out more. That's a situation in which they have more explosive plays. That's a situation that's more apt to go over the total than a quarterback who averages only 5.5 to 6 yards per passing attempt. This is a guy who's dinking and dunking it. So for me, Jim, it's yards per passing attempt, although I do agree that yards per rush attempt on offense and defense is important as is the yards per pass attempt. So I would submit to you that even a lot of people poo-poo the stat. I think yards per passing attempt is an important one when I'm handicapping totals. And you did mention potential side plays. There's an interesting game that qualifies here in an 18-1-2 ATS situation. We talked a little bit about it last week because there was a chance that we were going to see a big home dog last week. We didn't. The line went down a little bit. I'm talking about the Buffalo New York Jets game, the game in which we both like the Jets, and Buffalo kind of showed them who's boss.
Unfortunately,
30-10. An early turnover in the game really changed the tide for the Jets and the Buffalo Bills. But that stat I'm talking about is, we briefly mentioned it last week. If you get any NFL home underdog of a touchdown or more in the first 9 weeks of the season, touchdown or more being +7 or more points. The Jets didn't quite qualify in that last week, as I think they closed at maybe, was it a 6-point dog, maybe a 6.5-point home dog?
Exactly.
Didn't quite get to 7, so they didn't quite qualify in that 18-1-2 ATS situation. But there's a team this week that is catching 7 or more points at home. And Jim, it's a kind of a hold your nose play. It's our boys from Northeastern Ohio, the Cleveland Browns, who are home dogs of 7.5 to 8 as we speak, against the high-flying Green Bay Packers, a team a lot of people think is the best team in the NFL. So we will say this. I know Mark mentioned it as one of his plays in the playbook newsletter. The fact that Cleveland has got the best rushing defense, we'll cover this a little bit more when I run through some of this week's props. But Cleveland actually has the best rushing defense in the entire NFL. That could be problems from Green Bay on the road. And if you want to hold your nose and jump in, I've played it already. But again, the official stat is 18-1-2 ATS and a home underdog of 7 or more points in the first half of the season, the first 9 games of the season. The Browns are active in that this week against the Green Bay Packers. I kind of like the play because there's going to be a ton of Green Bay money, right? I mean,
Well,
people are going to knee jerk over what happened in weeks 1 and week 2 in the NFL. They saw Green Bay dominate Washington last week. They saw Cleveland, a team that outstatted Baltimore last week, still got their ass kicked on the road.
And Cleveland played very well against Cincinnati when Burrow was still there in the first game. But this is a point I want to bring out both on this game and on the Indiana Colts game. Green Bay played both of their games at home. Now they're a favorite by over a touchdown on the road. There's got to be a little bit of an adjustment there in statistical and in our minds. This now team is on the road favored against a team that plays pretty damn good defense. Now, right. Obviously, it's been 100 years since Cleveland's been a real viable team, but they do at times play very well in their defense. I mean, their quarterback situation's a mess, but on defense, they play pretty damn well.
Absolutely. And they're a better home team than they are a road team. That's already shown this year when they went right down to the wire and, in fact, missed a field goal against Cincinnati at the end of the game. They should have won that game. That game won. So, excuse me, Cleveland better home than on the road. Packers' first road game of the season after dominating at home. I know the Packers have been a fantastic ATS team like in the first month of play. But again, most of those stats are built on their home games. So they're on the road. They're laying more than a touchdown. Again, it may require you to hold your nose, but the value in this game is definitely on the big home underdog.
Right.
If you're an ATS player. Now, you had a question, what was it about the Colts game? The Colts.
Well, it was just because it was similar. They had won 2 games at home, and now they're favored on the road. But that one's a different situation because that's a division game, where the Cleveland game is not.
Right. It is a division game, and they're not laying quite the number that the Packers are. What is it, 4.5? 4 to 4.5 for the Colts.
I have to look that up. It's not very high. And, of course, you are going against a rookie quarterback.
Right. That's the one intangible in that game. I'd rather put a few dollars on a veteran Cleveland quarterback than a Cam Ward who's still trying to kind of find himself in pro football against the Colts. Again, if there is any value, it is on the divisional home underdog, particularly if you can get it over 3 points.
Well, this one is pretty solid 4 right now.
Colts win 24-20, maybe 23-20 in the game.
Well, that would make the dog players happy.
Yes, it would. It certainly would.
But I don't know where the hell the Colts get 20 points from because Ward has had 25 opportunities to move the ball down the field. Let's say it's 40 or 60 yards per. In the 2 games he's played, but he's only scored 1 touchdown, and that was the game where he rolling all the way to the right and threw the ball completely across his body and ended up in the end zone for a touchdown. But that was the only play he scored with that kind of situation all year.
Right. Plus the fact that they played a defense last week that is leading the NFL in least yards per play allowed. The Rams have allowed only 4.3 yards per play this season in their 2 games, number 1. So that was also part of Tennessee's struggles last week, were the fact that they played such a fantastic defense. And they were in the game at half. That game was 10-10 at the half, I believe. It was the second half when the Rams really busted out on
It was.
offense.
It was.
And Matt Stafford was connecting left and right with Pakua Nakua and Devontae Adams as well. It was the second half in which the Rams really blew away the Tennessee Titans.
I'm not trying to take us off course, but that is a big game later on in the day on Sunday, the Rams and the Eagles. But I know you have games that you wanted to talk about.
It certainly is. Yeah. And in fact, maybe we should move into some of our prop area really quickly. We got a couple, 3, 4, 5 props I like. And then we can maybe conclude with a touchdown parlay that I like as well. But starting with some of the props we like this particular week, I'm going to start with props that are worthy to bet on their own. And it's just basically solo bets. Putting a bunch of individual player props together in a parlay, not a big fan of it. I'd rather play 3, 4, 5 props individually. If we go 3-2, 4-1, 5-0, we're going to have a winning day. But prop number one I want to throw out there is, it's not a surprising prop, and it is on a Bryce Young prop. Quarterback Bryce Young, Carolina Panthers at home against Atlanta this week. I believe it's Carolina's actual first home game of the season. But it's a Bryce Young pass attempts prop. He's currently at 32.5 passing attempts for this game. And we love the over on this particular game. You might be surprised to learn that Bryce Young actually enters this week as the NFL league leader in passing attempts. Through his first 2 games already, 90 pass attempts through 2 games. He's averaging 45 passing attempts per game. His number for this week is only 32.5. That's not surprising. Carolina has been a 6 to 7 point underdog in each of their first 2 games of the season. And they're a 5.5 point home dog against the Atlanta Falcons this week as well. So it's this play is all about game script or game flow. We are talking about what potentially happens throughout the course of the game. Well, when you have a touchdown underdog, then the quarterback from that team is going to be throwing the ball a lot more because you are potentially playing from behind most of the game. And that is the case with Bryce Young. Again, 90 passing attempts through 2 games. He had 55 passing attempts last week against the Cardinals.
Whoa, wow.
All we're asking for is the Falcons to get off to an early lead, and chances are very, very good that Bryce Young goes over 32.5 pass attempts in this game. A great chance to go over this number. So, I mean, this is one of those almost like no-brainer plays. A team who really impressed me on Monday night on defense against the run, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a team that is very, very difficult to run against. They were last year. They were this year as well. For that reason, I'm playing Breece Hall of the New York Jets under his number. And this is another game script, game flow. The Jets, who will not be starting Justin Fields at quarterback, will be starting Tyrod Taylor, are basically a touchdown underdog in this game. That already tells you that they're going to be running the ball less than they are passing. Because, again, like the Carolina game, you get a touchdown underdog, you're going to be behind most of the game. You're going to be throwing more than you are running the ball. So Breece Hall under 50.5 rushing yards. This looks solid. Again, I mentioned Tampa Bay. They currently rank second in opponent rush EPA and opponent rush success rate. They're only allowing 3.3 yards per carry against opposing rushers this season. Just look how much they shut down the Atlanta Falcons rushing attack in week 1, the same Atlanta team that exploded for 200 or more rushing yards against Minnesota in week 2. So if the Buccaneers can hold the Falcons to so few yards with their great rushing game, Breece Hall is going to struggle this week on the road in a situation in which they're going to be playing from behind and passing a lot more than running. So Brees Hall, New York Jets, under 50.5 rushing yards in that game.
What might add to that is that Tyrod Taylor is a very capable scrambler and might end up taking some of those rushing plays away from Hall.
Taking some of those as well. You're absolutely right. Not to mention, Jim, the fact that, the Jets, the coaches, they already announced prior to the season that this is going to be a running back by committee. And while Brees Hall has obviously looked so much better than Braylon Allen, the second string Jet running back, and Isaiah Davis, their third string Jet running back, and he has. Don't forget, it's still a running back by committee. So you factor in extra rushing yards from Taylor, the fact that Brees Hall is not necessarily a bell cow running back, that all adds a little bit more fuel to our fire. And I do thanks for adding that interesting little tidbit in regards to Tyrod Taylor and the fact that he's a runner in addition to a passer. That's for sure.
Yes.
You know who else is a quarterback who's running more than he's passing? Segue to our next play. It's Patrick Mahomes. And we're going to be playing Patrick Mahomes over his rush total for the third week in a row. Over 30.5 rushing yards. Again, let's factor in Rashee Rice, injured. Xavier Worthy, injured. With all these Kansas City injuries on offense, Mahomes has basically taken matters into his own hands, or in this case, his legs. That's for sure. His first two games of the season, he's rushed for 57 yards and 66 yards. It's also worth noting that Mahomes has historically run a lot more when playing in prime time games. And this is your Sunday night NBC TV prime time game. He's averaging 5.2 more rushing yards per game when playing under the lights than compared to a normal average Sunday afternoon game. So he's already showed it in weeks 1 and 2. We got a nice conservative, fairly low number. Patrick Mahomes over 30.5 rushing yards. Again, just worthy of betting on its own as a standalone play is Patrick Mahomes. And the fourth one I want to add before we get into our TD parlay, Jim, is something we touched on briefly because we talked about the game. And it's this, again, Cleveland Browns versus Green Bay Packers game. Packers laying a touchdown or more on the road. We're liking our home dog as far as an ATS perspective goes. But with that said, I'm going to take Green Bay's number one running back and play him under the total. That's Josh Jacobs. He's currently around 74, maybe 75 rushing yards. Excuse me, is his number for his rushing prop. And yeah, it's been a difficult 2 weeks for the Brownies. But one thing that we can point out, Mark mentioned a really, really good article about the Cleveland Rush defense in this week's Playbook Football newsletter, is that their rush defense has been extremely strong. They rank number 6th in opponent rush EPA, 6th in opponent rush success rate, and they've allowed only 2.1 yards per carry, the fewest in the NFL. Yes, we're only in week 3. It's a 2-week small sample size,
Yeah.
but that's a damn good rush defense. They just played the most potent rushing attack in the NFL, the Baltimore Ravens. You see what the Browns did against them. They held them in check big time in that particular game. Again, only allowing 2.1 yards per carry. Josh Jacobs has already struggled a little bit to start the year. He's only averaging 3.6 yards per carry through his first 2 games. I think he's going to struggle to get going in this game. So again, another standalone worthy prop play is Josh Jacobs under his rushing a total when the Packers hit the road and play our Brownies in Northeastern Ohio on Sunday afternoon. So we got about 3, 4, 5, what I consider really strong individual props to play, Jim. And if we got one more to add, no, we haven't done great with these TD props. But the great thing about these TD props are we're trying to put together a couple of touchdown props that pay 14-1 or higher odds. So you know what that means. If we hit two of these props through the first 14 games of the season, we're turning a profit. So
Right.
these are not designed to win every week. That's just the nature of the business. If you're playing a 14-1 shot, a 16-1 shot, a 26-1 shot, you hit it once or twice throughout the course of a long NFL season, and we are ahead of the game. And that's
Also not meant to put your mortgage payment on these bets.
this is fun little mad money. Okay,
Right.
we hold our big bets for our full game over unders, some of our team totals, perhaps some of these good standalone props. But scoring a touchdown in an NFL game, you're right. That's mad money. That's fun little money that we're gonna play, and we don't give a crap if we win money or lose money or not. When we win, it's fantastic. When we lose, it's no big deal. That's for sure. But two-player long shot touchdown parlay. Last was a three-player last week's. We're going to cut it down. We're going to go two-player, and this one does pay 14-1 odds. And number one, the player that anytime touchdown, we're getting this guy currently at plus 360. Those are some really nice long shot, and it's New Orleans Saints tight end Juwan Johnson to score a touchdown this week. He's currently, again, at plus 360 on FanDuel Sportsbook. He's been one of the surprise breakouts in the early stages of the season already, and that's both in real life and in his fantasy football numbers. Juwan Johnson is averaging 10 targets per game through two games. He's got a 90% route participation rate through 2 weeks. So he's very, very heavily involved in the New Orleans passing attack as they hit the road and play Seattle up in the Pacific Northwest this particular week. He's also tied with Tucker Kraft of the Packers for most red zone targets, 3 at the tight end position. They've already targeted him multiple times in the red zone, Juwan Johnson, and he's got a solid matchup as the Seahawks have been a little bit leaky to tight ends in coverage. Both Pat Freiermuth and who's the other Pittsburgh tight end? Oh, Jonnu Smith last week. They combined for 7 catches, 8 targets, 60 yards last week. Don't forget George Kittle had a great opening week. All 4 of his targets for 25 yards in the opener. I think Spencer Rattler has got a safety valve type player, and it's Juwan Johnson, and his odds to score are at plus 360. So we're going to put him in, and we're calling this our late afternoon 2-player TD parlay. Again, it starts with Juwan Johnson of the Saints, and it's going to conclude with a guy who's already got 3 touchdowns on the season, and that's a Charger wide receiver. The Chargers are hosting the Broncos in what many are saying is the best late afternoon kickoff game. Denver.
It's going to be a brutal game. Yeah.
Against the Chargers. A game that I think is actually going to be a little higher scoring than people think. That's just my own personal opinion. We'll move on from there. But Quentin Johnson, the ex-TCU receiver for the Chargers, plus currently 235, maybe 230 out there to score again for his 3rd week in a row. What's surprising is that, the Chargers, they lead the NFL in a stat that they call pass rate over expectation at 9 plus 12%. The passing attempt is spreading the ball well. Granted, we got 3 pretty good wide receivers on the Chargers team. Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson, veteran Keenan Allen. Obviously, these were the top 3 targeted wide receivers for the Chargers last week in week 2. All 3 have topped 100 receiving yards on the season already through 2 games. And the group has combined for 5 touchdowns already, though McConkey is the one who hasn't scored. It's the other 2 guys who've been doing all the scoring, Quentin Johnson and Keenan Allen. And my approach usually when I'm betting Chargers touchdowns, take the longest price wide receiver of the three, and you'll get the best value. Last week, that was Johnson at plus 250, and he cashed. So I'm going back to him this week. You can find him anywhere from 230 to plus 235. He leads the wide receiver group with 3 touchdowns in 3 games. He boasted a big time target share of 93% in week 2. And there you go with that's the one we're going to put together is Juwan Johnson of the Saints, Quentin Johnston of the Chargers. You know what I'm thinking? You can almost call that like a Johnson and Johnson parlay or something like that. That's kind of a weird thing. One is a plus 360, one's about plus 230. Either way, that'll bring back 14-1 odds. If you can find a better odd on Quentin Johnson, you might even get 15-1 odds. But that's the one TD prop parlay I'm betting this week. Late afternoon total. Juwan Johnson of the Saints to score a touchdown. Quentin Johnston of the Chargers to score a touchdown as well. 2 guys to score. Late kickoffs. If we hit it, it's a fantastic late afternoon for us in addition to our other action. But that's going to be our parlay prop for the week 3 of the NFL. Johnson of the Saints, Johnston of the Chargers, both to score a touchdown.
And that's going to be a hell of a game to watch, too. I mean, you got 2 very good head coaches, miracle men and Jim Harbaugh, how he turns teams around. And you got Sean Payton, who should have probably won last week, except for that leverage call.
Right.
But this is going to be a hell of a game.
I'm also glad that the NFL. Look, the one drawback or the one complaint I have about last week's schedule was there was only 3 late afternoon kickoff games.
Right.
You gotta have at least 4. You gotta have. I don't care if you gotta cut down the early schedule from 8 games to 7, but you gotta have at least 4 late afternoon starts. And credit the NFL for this week's schedule. There are 4 indeed late afternoon games for us in the East Coast, 4 early afternoon games for you guys out there in the West Coast. Broncos, Chargers, Saints, Seahawks, Cardinals, 49ers, and what a lot of people think is potentially the highest scoring game of the weekend, Cowboys and Bears. With that said, you may ask what my opinion is on that one. Since we nailed the Bears over against Detroit last week and we nailed the Cowboys over against the Giants, what do you think about this week's game? You going over, you going under? Right now I'm laying off. There's a lot of data in the database that suggests this game will actually be slightly lower scoring than people think. So with that said, I think this game is too easy to bet the over, the Cowboys and the Bears. Particularly when we've got good numbers on the other side. So I haven't touched it as of yet. If I had to, I would actually wager on the under, but I'm not going to. 2 bad defenses, 2 interesting offenses. The Cowboys we talked about as one of our favorite over teams before the season even started. For some reason, there's something about the game that scares me when betting the over. So I'm going to pass.
Probably looks too easy
on my Cowboy. Right. It looks too easy.
It looks too easy. But, the way I look at this is Dallas has got explosive offense. They're going up against a terrible defense. Chicago, if Caleb Williams is ever going to do anything, it has to be, what a better opportunity. Dallas doesn't even know how to play defense. I don't even think they bothered putting the 11 guys out on the floor or on the field. That was unbelievable what they did last week. You know that Russell Wilson loves to throw the moon ball. The best thing to do against that is allow the receivers to get behind you so that they have an open shot at catching them. And that's what they did the whole damn game. I don't think Russell Wilson will get away with that this week.
You're right.
I bet Dallas over. I'm going to take the easy shot. I'm wrong.
There you go, Jim. We got some interesting totals this week. we'll see what happens in regards to the league as a whole. Some interesting props, a late afternoon prop parlay as well. I think we are in line for a successful and profitable week 3 in the NFL.
Absolutely. Vic, I want to thank you. You're always extremely prepared, well put together, great delivery. The information is incredible. I would go to Playbook, buy the sheet for the totals, buy the sheet for the playbook. And now this week, you got the third sheet with the midweek.
The midweek, right.
I would definitely go after all of that. Even if you don't use the picks, the information to go in and use it for yourself. I would certainly recommend that you use the picks, but you can use the information also. So there's a lot of value there. So do that. Victor, thank you again very much. We'll see you next Friday.
Thank you, Jim. This is a pleasure for me. Anytime I can interact with a Vegas and sports betting legend like yourself is a true honor for me. Thanks again.
Thank you, Victor. Take care.